at the top of White Top. We're at the top of White Top Mountain, getting ready to bike down the 17 miles. Here we go.
Backstory about how the bike trail came to be. It sits down on an old railroad that started being built back in 1855. The main railroad through the area went from Lynchburg down to Bristol, Tennessee. It was called the Virginia-Tennessee Railroad. And about 1855, the Abingdon Iron and Coal Company started a branch off that main line towards Damascus. I think they might have gotten as far as Damascus before they folded, ran out of money. Somebody else picked it up and continued it on to Taylor's Valley before they folded. Back where we made that turn back there, Conorock, there was a big sawmill there, and at the time, and they ended up building a branch from Taylor Valley over to the sawmill so they get their wood in and out. And somebody finally continued it up over the top of White Top. Went down through Lansing, North Carolina, through West Jefferson, and it dead-ended in Todd, North Carolina. I guess the total from Abingdon around was about 70 miles. And I think originally the first group that started it thought maybe it was going to be used heavily for mining, but this area really wasn't mined for anything. What they did in this area early on was they came through and clear-cut all the trees. They cut down some really, really beautiful dead old hardwoods and things like that. And I've seen pictures of this area where there's no trees, no shrubs, nothing. It's kind of ugly up here. But all the trees that you see now are like first and second generation replants, and it's taken a long time for them to come back. The area for the longest time up here was used for cattle grazing. When the cattle thing moved on, the open spaces, that's where they got the space for the Christmas tree farms, which is the big cash crop nowadays. But as the railroad went on, they got things continued, and once the logging industry moved on, things started to slow down for the railroad, and they used to run passenger and cargo all the way up into about the 60s. That's when they stopped running passenger trains. The cargo ended up dwindling down to the point where by the mid-70s, they finally just let it go. They shut it down. They came in and pulled all the rails up, got most of the railroad ties, and that was it. By 1977, they were closed. In North Carolina, when the railroad shut down, the property that the railroad sat on, which is about as wide as this road from shoulder to shoulder with a right-of-way, in North Carolina, the property was actually given to the homeowners whose property was adjacent to the right-of-way. Well, Virginia's got laws against private citizens owning old railroad property, so it ended up getting turned over to the state, which is where it was sitting when the folks that came up with the idea of doing a recreational trail, that's where they were able to get the property once they got their idea together. It wasn't long after the railroad shut down, though. Damascus was not doing all that well. The railroad was shut down. We had lost our last factory. Infrastructure was crumbling. Things were looking pretty bleak. They thought that it might go under. Abingdon didn't have as much of a problem. Parts of Abingdon have been open since the mid-1700s. You got the Barter Theater, the oldest live theater on the East Coast. You got the Martha Washington Inn, and even the Tavern Restaurant. They've been around since the 1700s. So Abingdon wasn't all that worried about it, but Damascus, it didn't look good. And all the town elders from both towns got together and started brainstorming to try to figure out a way to save the town. And they figured that if they could figure out a way to get hold of the railroad property, maybe they could open up some sort of recreational trail. And their idea was that if they could get hold of the property, we're going to open up a recreational hiking trail. Now, the Rail to Trail organization had been around for a while. This was early 80s by then. And so people were aware of the Rail to Trail premise. once they figured out what they had to do in order to get the property, what that was the Forestry Service, Damascus, and Abingdon all got together and created a conservancy group, and they were able to buy the property from the old Abingdon train station all the way up to the North Carolina state line. So it's about 34.5 miles. So once they got the property all bought up, they still were thinking hiking trail, and I think they were going with that because that's what they know best. The Appalachian Trail's been coming through Damascus for a long time, so they were going to go with their strong suit. So they had to go through and work on all the trestles and the trail surface and change it over, make sure all the bridges were safe. Some of this work took a couple of years. I think they had to replace at least one bridge. So while they're working on all this, the surface and the bridges and everything, locals started riding their bicycles on the old railroad track. And it was just a couple of people at first, and then the word got out, and more were doing it. So while all these folks are doing the work on the bridges and everything, they were seeing this, and finally somebody had an epiphany and realized that that was what they needed to do. Instead of a hiking trail, they went with a biking trail. One of the townellas in Damascus, she opened up the first shuttle company, and that was Blue Blaze. And they finally opened up and got going about 1989. They had a couple of legal problems early on, but got everything straightened out, opened up. It didn't take long for ridership to start growing. And like I said earlier, by 2015, Forestry Service requested the DOT do a study to try to figure out how many people ride the trail every year. And they put sensors up all over the place. And I actually remember seeing the sensors that year. I was living down in Charlotte then. And 2015, at the end of the year, they had their study. It was completed. They didn't have an exact number, but it was over 250,000 people that year. And that was 2015. And it keeps going up ever since. But the last couple of years have been way busier. Especially 2020. The Creeper Trail and the Appalachian Trail were both closed for 6 weeks. But even with that, when they opened back up, it was the middle of May, which would have been Trail Days week. Got canceled that year, unfortunately. But when they opened back up, middle of May, the Creeper Trail was hit. No other state had any kind of state park or hiking trail or anything like that. They were all closed to the public. And they weren't planning on opening anything back up until the state went into phase 3. Well, Virginia didn't go into phase 3 until end of July. And I think North Carolina was into August, maybe, something like that. And so we were it. And for 2 or 3 months, we were the only thing for anybody to come and do, and everybody came and did it.
Well, hello again.
People in the background. There.
Hello again.
We're sitting on the main street of Damascus, Virginia. We rode the Creeper Trail. We hiked the channels, and we hiked Backbone Rock.
Backbone, yep.
And we've camped at Laurel Creek RV Park.
Yep.
And we'll do a separate video on that. But we feel like it. So, would you come back here?
I would come back here, yeah.
I would too.
As I was telling Shannon on the trail, that I would say this is by far the top of my rail trail experiences.
I thought we've done a ton, but so far this will be hard to top. It was beautiful. The trail itself was beautiful.
Yeah, and all joking aside, it was very easy trail. So if you are concerned about biking a mountain, it's all downhill.
If you get shuttled to the top.
Really, it's all downhill.
Yeah. And it's well maintained. I know that we were talking with the shuttle driver about who maintains it, and it's not had a lot of maintenance because of, the pandemic, but some is coming, but we couldn't tell that it hasn't had.
Right.
I mean, it's just very nice, very enjoyable ride.
Yep.
Our bodies are not feeling like it was an enjoyable ride, but
yeah. Well, it was our first outing on bikes, and it's 17 miles. So, and again, there's no real effort to it. So, don't let that stop you. The 17 miles.
Yeah. So, come to Damascus, Virginia. check it out. There's lots of houses that can be rented. There's a couple campgrounds. In addition to Laurel Creek, although Laurel Creek's really nice because you back right up to the water.
The other one too, the other one that's in town, and I'm drawing a blank. That one backs up to the creek too, but it's only like
there's only a few sites.
4 or 5 sites,
yeah.
It looks like. So, but there's other campgrounds around too, and if you got a smaller rig, you could even do some of the.
There's lots of national forests nearby that were beautiful,
yep.
especially by Backbone
Yeah,
Rock.
And the state park.
Oh yeah, Highland.
Grayson
Highland, where the ponies.
Yep.
We tried to see the ponies.
Yep.
So anyway, so that wraps up our journey here to Damascus. We'll show you pictures that we took and our highlights, and it was a good trip.
Yep.
We start venturing home. If you like this video, please like and subscribe.